Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. FPL Vincenzo here, and we're heading into a highly anticipated week in FPL. It's obviously double game week 33, 6 teams with a double game week, and effectively I think for all FPL managers there's going to be a chip in play here. Spoke about it on my pod ahead of the game week 32 deadline around sort of my thoughts. Some people would have gone ahead and activated their wildcard last week with the plan to bench boost this week. Others will be looking to wildcard this week. Others will be looking to free hit this week. And that pod I released before game week 32 was still, I think, quite 50-50 in terms of whether I would free hit or whether I would wildcard. I've still not completely made my mind up in terms of what chip I'll be playing in game week 33, but I am sort of 80-20 now in favour of the free hit. So having sort of pushed myself more in that direction, I think now's a good time to really analyse the free hit and sort of start to clamp down a little bit on what players I want and what a free hit draft will look like. So obviously that's the purpose of this pod, to talk through sort of my current version of sort of FPL game week 33 free hit. Obviously not fixed yet, not set in stone yet, still plenty of time to make some adjustments, but just thought it'd be a good opportunity to talk through sort of my current thoughts and where I'm heading in terms of direction. So I thought I'd talk through it all sort of position by position at the moment, and really focus on screen, at least from a data perspective, on what data's showing us across recent form. And then obviously I'll sprinkle in some eye test analysis to go with that. So obviously firstly with goalkeepers, let's look at what we think in terms of clean sheets. Rob T has done his normal teams to target. And in terms of what his expectations are for this week, Man City have the highest probability of at least one clean sheet at 62%, Leeds at 52%, and then a reasonable gap down to Brighton at 41. And then actually two single game week teams, Aston Villa and Nottingham Forest at 40, into Chelsea, and then Bournemouth both at 39 with doubles. And then Burnley with their double a long way down at 20%. So clearly here, from sort of what the bookmakers are saying and what, say, the betting odds are saying in terms of targeting, Man City at the forefront of sort of defensive options, 62% chance of one clean sheet, and then Leeds next at 52, decent gap then to everybody else. So logic would say, looking at that, Man City and Leeds are the two teams to target for defensive options in this double. I've then done some analysis of individually of the 6 goalkeepers. So Sanchez at Chelsea, Verbruggen at Brighton, Petrovic at Bournemouth, Darlow at Leeds, Dubravka at Burnley, and Donnarumma at Man City, to look at what we're seeing data-wise from them in the last 6 game weeks. If there's any sort of takeaways here in terms of how many saves they're making, how many save points they've collected, and in general, their teams, what they're like in terms of XGC. And I think what's quite significant here is the team XGC. So if we look at the last 6 game weeks, Man City are actually the best defensive team, XGC of 4.76. Now, granted, they only played 5 games because obviously in game week 31, they blanked because of the League Cup final, but still the best defence in the league on data throughout the last 6 game weeks. Second is Arsenal, who obviously don't have a double and also included a blank. Third were Brighton in this period at 5.66, and fourth Leeds at 6.71. Chelsea ranked 7th or 8th. And interestingly, Bournemouth were about 18th and Burnley last. So clearly here, in the last 6 game weeks, of the 4 best defensive teams in terms of XGC, 3 of them have a double. Man City, Brighton and Leeds. Based on Rob T's projections, Leeds second best, Brighton third best. And then you look at the individual characteristics of the goalkeepers here. Verbruggen, 19 saves in 6 game weeks, 5 save points in that time. Same as Sanchez. Darlow on 4 save points, Donnarumma on 3 save points. There's nothing particularly outstanding in this around Dubravka, Petrovic or Sanchez to suggest that any of these 3 goalkeepers should be considered. It clearly, for me, is a big priority for goalkeepers and defenders, and we'll get onto defenders on the next slide, that the big focus of this needs to be Man City, Leeds and Brighton. Outright, if you look at the data and if you look at the goalkeeper performance, I think Verbruggen stands out slightly as the best goalkeeper. He's asked to make more saves. That qualifies him for more save points. Brighton, data-wise, slightly better than Leeds. You could argue, I think, Verbruggen is slightly more narrow. I don't think Darlow is going to be rested for Perry at any point, but we know Verbruggen's definitely first choice. Darlow maybe sort of 80, 90%. Things like that. So I think that the hard part with Donnarumma is that naturally I think people will look at outfield Man City players, and there's plenty of options with Haaland, Semenyo, Cherki, Nico O'Reilly if he's past fit, Mark Gahey, Matthias Nunes, etc. Not to consider Donnarumma, where particularly I think for Brighton, picking 3 outfield players isn't quite so straightforward. For Leeds, again, I know we've lost Anton Stach now, but we've got Calvert-Lewin as a striker. Obviously, Okafor scored 2 goals against Man United. Plenty of options around the defence as well, that we could probably find ourselves 3 Leeds outfield players. Confidently could pick 3 Man City outfield players. Maybe not quite so straightforward with Brighton. You could pick Danny Welbeck, but there's minutes risks with him. Lots of midfielders, but are any of them really nailed? The likes of Hinshelwood, Gomez, Vifa, Pascal Gross, and then obviously some options in defence as well. So logically, I think looking at this, Verbruggen stands out. But I don't hate picking Darlow or Donnarumma here, and we'll get on to my final draft at the end. But that's my sort of takeaways here from the goalkeepers. Remember some of this data, though, moving on into the defender slides. So let's move on to defenders in the last 6 game weeks. And I think when we're picking defenders on the free hit, they fall into 2 categories. Are they very high on DEFCON, or do they have sort of above average sort of attacking numbers? And obviously, as it's a free hit only for 1 game week, I think natural instinct takes over here. And we think, let's go for attacking high upside players rather than the safer DEFCON picks. So I've split the defenders into 2 categories. The top 5 with double game weeks for DEFCON, and the top 5 with a double game week for attacking data. So we'll go through the DEFCON guys first. And slightly surprising here, I wouldn't have foreseen this coming, but there's only 1 defender in the whole of FPL, actually, who has got DEFCON in 5 of the last 6 game weeks, and that's Jean-Paul Van Hecke. Not naturally, I don't think, a standout in terms of DEFCON this year. There's obviously candidates like Tarkowski and Senesi. I think that we've kind of known all season they're very high for DEFCON. But lately, at least, last 6 game weeks, Van Hecke has got DEFCON in 5 fixtures, so 10 DEFCON points. He's the best defender in the whole of FPL, and he happens to have a double game week. The other defenders with doubles, none of them are getting DEFCON at a better strike rate than 50%. So there's 4 of them that have got 6 DEFCON points out of 12 in the last 6 game weeks. The 2 Bournemouth guys, unsurprisingly, Hill and Senesi, quite well touted as DEFCON defenders. Bijol at Leeds, 6 DEFCON points, and also Wesley Fofana, 6 DEFCON points. So if you're sort of in the hunt, shall we say, and are picking your defenders based on DEFCON, you're picking from those 5 options. But Van Hecke, the clear standout here based on recent form of the last 6 game weeks, if that's a long enough sample size for you. In terms of attacking data, I've looked at XG and XGI here. Again, no surprise, Nico O'Reilly a long way clear. 2.28 XGI, 1.78 XG would be an absolute lock, I think, here on free hit if we knew he was definitely fit for both games. Went off with the hamstring complaint in game week 32, having scored, obviously, in that game week. And I think he's been seen in some photos since in the background behind Haaland, thinking that the injury maybe isn't that serious and he is fit for game week 33. Now, obviously, he could play both games in the double, and if we knew that, we would pick him. Do I want to take that risk on a free hit? My gut feeling is probably no. I'd obviously be quite frustrated if he did play both. And will he? And if he is only fit sort of for one, they don't want to risk him. Manchester City, what fixture will they play him in? The sort of harder game at home to Arsenal where the title could be on the line there, or the slightly easier game with Burnley? Will they play him against Arsenal, maybe give him an early sub, 65, 70 minutes as a precaution, and then just give him Burnley completely off and start Aït-Nouri at left back or something? Or will they think the other way around? We don't want to risk someone who's maybe not 100% against Arsenal and we'll save him for Burnley. Either way round, my gut feeling is right now he's not going to start both the games. I don't think I want to pick a double game week defender who's going to start both games. I know he did very well against Arsenal in the League Cup final, but if I'm going to end up picking effectively someone who's going to have a single game week, would I pick someone playing at home to Arsenal in that circumstance? Probably not. So begrudgingly, I don't think I'm picking Nico O'Reilly. Behind him, in terms of defenders with attacking data, is Jaden Bogle at Leeds, 1.69 XGI. Concerning slightly is only 0.26 of that is XG. And again, if we're chasing upside here, goals have way more value than assists. I don't think that's high enough for me to really pick him. Mark Gahey, very good in both metrics, 1.46 XGI, 1.16 XG. Clearly one of the main targets of their set pieces, alongside Haaland and Rodri and players like that. So I think he's reasonable. Mark Cucurella next, 0.9 XGI, 0.62 XG. And from an eye test perspective, quite involved in that last game with Man City. Had a goal disallowed, 2 or 3 other moments in the Man City penalty box. I remember sort of back towards the end of the last FPL season, towards the end, he became a big topic of conversation, ended up in quite a lot of teams. Obviously, wasn't quite at the level of Daniel Munoz in terms of attacking output, attacking capabilities. But from an eye test perspective, in terms of fullbacks that got forward a lot, that spent time in the penalty box and had chances, Cucurella was right up there. It was also always seemed like it was imminent he was going to get an attacking return. He's giving me those sort of vibes at the moment. I don't particularly trust Chelsea. I don't rate them overly defensively either. But if we're going to take what we'll call a punt in this free hit, I think he's more than valid. The double isn't horrible. Obviously, Chelsea have got a lot to play for, competing for the Champions League qualification spaces. He is that sort of defender that will pop up in the box and have a moment. So I don't hate him. And then the fifth defender is Alex Jimenez here at Bournemouth, playing at right back, 0.83 XGI. Again, not particularly high XG component towards this. So if you're looking at XG for defenders across the last 6 game weeks, the top 4 all have doubles. Quite interesting. And that's O'Reilly at 1.78, Gahey at 1.16, Cucurella at 0.62, and interestingly, James Hill at 0.44. They're the best 4 defenders in FPL at the moment across the last 6 game weeks for XG. Hill, I think, is quite interesting because he gets DEFCON half the time. His XG number is quite strong. His XGI number is quite strong. On the flip side of that, Bournemouth have the 18th best XGC in the last 6 game weeks. And the clean sheet probabilities, according to Rob T's data, aren't that high. So he's a bit all in or all bust sort of pick, I think, Hill. I don't hate picking him, but can you do better? What are you putting your weight on here for this double? A team getting at least 1 clean sheet where Leeds and Brighton in particular are superior to Bournemouth? Or are you hoping that he gets that attacking return where maybe he's a bit better than the Leeds and the Brighton guys? Clearly here his XG and XGI is better than the likes of Bijal and Van Heck. So my main takeaway from this, and we'll get to my team at the end, is Van Hecker looks a lock here. By a long way, the best defender in the game at the moment. Recent performances, maybe Brighton have changed something to make him more prone to DEFCON compared to earlier in the year. Obviously, Lewis Dunk's been suspended last game week as well. So I think Van Heck becomes a lock for me. I think away from him, I think it's quite open how you want to play this. If you want attacking defenders, I don't hate Cucurella. I think Gahey's got quite solid numbers if you don't want to risk O'Reilly or don't want 3 Man City attackers. James Hill is quite well-rounded in terms of DEFCON and attacking capabilities, but Bournemouth don't have great fixtures for clean sheets. But again, he's a reasonable pick. On the flip side, Bijal is probably the pick of the Leeds defenders here because of the DEFCON capability where he's superior to Struijk, who didn't even make the list here. And Leeds have obviously a reasonable double. So there are options. I say for some, the Bournemouth double up will be tempting. Is there a possibility of a triple up with Petrovic for some? Maybe go all in on that. I don't know. But for me, the only certainty here is I'd want Van Heck on a free hit. On to midfielders, and I've tried to do things the same, break them down into DEFCON picks and into upside picks. This time, only 4 midfielders qualified in the DEFCON section. So where Van Hecker is the only defender who's got more than 6 DEFCON points in the last 6 game weeks, there are 2 midfielders that have topped that as well. Ethan Ampadu at Leeds has 8, and Alex Scott at Bournemouth has 8. And then matching the defenders is Diego Gomez, despite playing in the front 3 at Brighton, which is quite interesting with 6. And obviously Max Vifa, who's been playing at right back for Brighton with 6. So if you want security of DEFCON in midfield, they're your best 4 options here. In terms of attacking capabilities, top for XGI is Jack Hinshelwood, so another Brighton representative, 3.22 XGI, of which 1.81 is XG. Arguably the best upside midfielder this week, despite the fact Cole Palmer's got a double and Antoine Semenyo's got a double, is Marcus Tavernier. So 2.91 XGI, 2.10 XG. That's the fourth best XG amongst midfielders in the last 6 game weeks, and the best of those with a double game week. Top above him in normal circumstances would be Anthony Gordon, Kevin Schade, and Bruno Fernandes. So based on data, he's the midfielder with the most likeliness to get a goal. Third is Cole Palmer, 2.33 XGI, 1.2 of that is XG, not incredibly high. Then sort of one of the players getting sort of the most hype, should we say, is Ryan Cherky. 2.32 XGI is fine, but only 0.59 of that is XG. Not that he can't score goals, but very assist-driven in terms of data. Do we want players like that on our free hit, or are we chasing goal scorers? Then Jadon Anthony at 2.12 XGI, 1.23 XG. And then Antoine Semenyo, only 6th here of the double game week midfielders for XGI, just 1.98 in the last 6 game weeks. Obviously, he missed a game again because of the cup final. 1.82 of that is XG. So not much assist threat from him, mainly goal threat. So talking points here, I think Tavernier is quite hard to leave out with that XG of 2.1. And I think the big question is, are Bournemouth good enough to pick 2 midfielders? Obviously, some will have 2 defenders and therefore they can't have 2 midfielders. But for me, looking at the data, the midfielders stand out more than the defenders for Bournemouth. So I say Alex Scott, 8 DEFCON out of 12. 1.27 XG is more than Cole Palmer, despite playing as a number 8. 1.81 XGI is basically just below Antoine Semenyo. So his capabilities of an attacking return is basically on par with Semenyo. His capability of a goal is basically on par with Cole Palmer. Those 2 midfielders, Palmer and Semenyo, are basically the 2 locks I've seen in most most free hit drafts, and for good reason. But say you've got Scott just as likely to get as a return as Semenyo and as likely to get a goal as Palmer based on the last 6 weeks, and he gives you 8 DEFCON points in 12 that the other 2 don't give you. If you was asking me, I think, to pick my sort of lock midfielder on a free hit at the moment, I think it would be him. He's a long way the most rounded. And I'd be quite surprised if he didn't get you something in both of Bournemouth's games, whether that's DEFCON, whether that's something else. I think he's probably more likely than any midfielder to guarantee sort of 8 points. And I think that might be enough. My mindset at the moment is, if I can find sort of 8-9 midfielders that can get me 8-9 players, so it can get me sort of 8 points, a captain that can get me sort of 10 plus, and then a goalkeeper, you're looking around 100 points. And I think I would take that right now. If you offer me 100 points on this free hit, that would be great. So a couple of players who I think are as locked as possible for 8 points is a good start. Van Hecker looks like one of those. DEFCON in both games. Alex Scott looks like one of those, a return of some kind in both games. And so I think for me, am I prepared to own double Bournemouth midfield with Tavernier, who's the most likely on data to score? I think I'm good with that at the moment. Semenyo, very interesting here. So I think if you asked people a week ago what their Man City free hit treble up would be, it would be O'Reilly, Semenyo and Haaland. I would probably myself back that as a triple up. But the data isn't incredible. It's got the same XG as Jack Hinshaw would. XGI-wise, I say he's barely better than Alex Scott, and there's 5 other midfielders XGI-wise than Semenyo who are better. Is this the best use of a Man City spot? We've seen data-wise defensively they're the best team in this double. I am quite keen. I think I want at least 1 piece of Man City defensive coverage. I've not written off 2. That means I can't have a triple up in attack. I think Haaland obviously speaks for himself. So is Semenyo definitely outright better than Cherky? XGI data-wise says no. Do I want to take a midfield spot up with Semenyo when I've got Tavernier with really high data, Cole Palmer taking penalties, etc., and a couple of good DEFCON picks here? I think of all the midfielders with a double, he has the highest ownership. Those that played their wild card a long time ago have probably got Semenyo. Those that played their wild card last week to prepare for this are playing Semenyo. If he does well, he's going to do well for a lot of teams. I imagine his ownership sort of 50% plus right now. maybe a bit dangerous from that perspective. Pick your battles is what people say. Maybe it's a bit dangerous not picking him. But I'm open-minded enough that eye test and data-wise, I'm not convinced he's one of the 3 strongest midfielders this week. So, I mean, he's probably in a discussion for 4th strongest. If you're going to play 3-4-3, he's probably in. If you're going to play 4-4-2, he's probably in. But at the moment, if you're looking to play 4-3-3 or something like that, there's arguments to leave him out. So just a consideration there. And then on, obviously, to strikers. And I put up Rob T's data again in terms of projected goals for this game week. Man City, unsurprisingly, first, 4.4, with a game against Burnley included. Then Chelsea at 3.15. Bournemouth then 3.11. Brighton 3.05, Leeds 3.04. Not much in it really between Chelsea, Bournemouth, Brighton and Leeds. Man City stand out. So quite notable here for Bournemouth that defensively they're the 7th best team. Attacking wise, they're the 3rd best team. Maybe that adds a little bit more weight to the fact that I'm considering a Bournemouth midfield double up rather than the defensive double up, which plenty of others are considering. Looking individually at the strikers, first notable thing here is how far down Haaland is. So across, there's 7 strikers here that I think are worthy of being picked with a double game week. Joel Pedro, Calvert-Lewin, Danny Welbeck, Zian Fleming at Burnley, and then Krupi and Evan Nilsson at Bournemouth and Haaland. Of those 7 strikers, XG-wise, Haaland is actually 6th in the last 6 game weeks. Now, again, he missed the game because of the League Cup final, but an XG of 1.29 in 6 game weeks is not particularly good. An XG of 1.59 is not particularly good. I think his XG is basically the same as Alex Scott in the last 6 game weeks, who's a Bournemouth sort of central midfield player. Just 3 big chances as well, and 12 shots in the box. You compare that to Joel Pedro, for example. Joel Pedro has a 4.84 XG. Not far off, 4 times better. 5.08 XGI, sort of 3 times better. 8 big chances to 3 to Pedro, 17 shots in the box to 12. If Man City weren't playing Burnley here, I would certainly consider captaining Joel Pedro. From a data perspective, Chelsea and Pedro in particular is way superior to Haaland, and he's playing against Man United next, who I think are without Maguire and Lisandro Martinez, both the first choice centre-backs. But that Burnley game, obviously for Man City, is significant, and I think you have to have Haaland for that reason. But from a data perspective, Pedro, Calvert-Lewin and Welbeck are a long way clear. In my colour coding scheme, green is good, yellow is pretty good, orange is average, red's quite bad. Pedro and Calvert-Lewin get green for everything. Welbeck, green for most things. Welbeck's got minutes issues, I think, for the second game in a double for Brighton against Chelsea. I think a lot of people concerned that he doesn't often play weekend and midweek. Therefore, is he at risk for the Chelsea game? Maybe he is. Maybe that's a risk that's not worth taking. But for me, Pedro has to go in, and I think is a more than viable captaincy pick. I think Calvert-Lewin really has to go in as well, considering Leeds are at home to Wolves in one of their games and what his underlying data is. And probably realistically, Haaland has to go in because of that game with Burnley. I think in terms of the 3 strikers are the easiest to pick. Pedro, Calvert-Lewin, Haaland. If you want to take a risk on someone else, it's obviously fine, but no concerns for me there. Then I jump ahead to my current 3-hit draft, and I take all of the stuff I've discussed here into consideration and trying to avoid really too many matchups against each other where I've got too many strikers playing against defenders, too many defenders playing against strikers, etc. I know it can't be helped in quite a small double game week, but it's, again, trying to avoid too many clashes. And this is where I've landed on so far. So 4-3-3 at the moment. And I obviously mentioned that I was concerned around Semenyo. So at the moment, I have gone in with double Man City defence. They're at home to Arsenal in the first game. Looking at what Arsenal are like, will Arsenal turn up trying to get a 0-0 draw in that game? They're obviously on a bad run of form. Will Arsenal have the intention, even though they're away, to try and win that game to confirm the title? Or will it be a case of damage limitation, let's not lose the game? My feeling at the moment is Arsenal will look to try. If you offered Arsenal a 0-0 now, they would take it. And I think they will come set up for that. Clearly not a free scoring side anyway, Arsenal. I could see it being another 0-0 or 1-0 Man City win. And then it's Burnley in the second game in the double, who are obviously bottom of the league. So considering I was looking at not having Semenyo and not having Cherki, Haaland stayed in. I thought, why not go for the double Man City defence? I trust Donnarumma far more than a Darlow or of a Bruggen, and I trust Man City far more than a Leeds or a Brighton. If I'm going to have a double up on any defensive team this week, Man City have the best underlying data for Team XGC. Rob T's data shows Man City are comfortably the best to guarantee at least one clean sheet this week. I'm happy to go in with that double up. Donnarumma in goal, who I expect to play both games. I don't expect Trafford to be rotated in for one of these. And Gahey is secure for minutes, has some underlying attacking threat. Maybe you'll get DEFCON in one of these two games or something. So I'm going for both. Van Hecker's in defence. Obviously, those 10 DEFCON points out of the last 12 available sway it for him. And then Bajol as the top Leeds defender. Another reason not to put Darlow in goal here is obviously one of Leeds' games in a double is against Bournemouth, and it's Bournemouth away for Leeds. I've got to Tavernier and Scott here. I don't really want to play two Bournemouth midfielders against two Leeds defenders. That's avoidable. There's no clashes here for Donnarumma or Gahey. Bijol has one clash against Tavernier and Scott, but the other game is Wolves at home, where I don't have any Wolves players. Same situation for Van Hecker. Tottenham away, no clash there. Home game with Chelsea. I've got plenty of Chelsea players here. I have gone with 4 at the back. I think there's space in this free hit for one punt spot, and it could be a midfielder. It could be a defender. I'm going a little bit on gut feeling and eye test in that Chelsea game with Manchester City that I saw Cucurella in that Man City penalty box so many times. He had a goal disallowed. He had another really good chance, and he was in the box a lot. If you said to me now, what's more likely to happen? Cucurella with his roots to points, whether that be a goal or an assist for how much he's getting forward, or Chelsea with a clean sheet. Obviously, it still counts as a return. I think he's way more likely to get 10 points by any method this week than punting an extra midfield, whether that's a Hinshelwood, whether that's a Diego Gomez, one of those sorts of players. And there's plenty of midfield punts that you could take this week. But I trust Cucurella more to get me 8-10 points than one of those midfielder punts. Chelsea could keep a clean sheet at home to Man United. Obviously, he could score in that game. Man United can be overrun in the middle of midfield. They're without both their centre-backs. Could be a good game for Chelsea there. And obviously a really must-win game for Chelsea if they're going to try and finish in the top 5 and qualify for Champions League. And then they're obviously away to Brighton. So I'm prepared to use my punt spot on Cucurella more than one of the midfielders. Into midfield, I say Alex Scott, I think, is the most rounded in terms of DEFCON and quite decent underlying attacking data. So I expect him to come out of this with 8 points minimum. Tavernier as the highest XG across the last 6 weeks, takes some set pieces as well, so routes to points for him. And then Cole Palmer goes in again, really to try and maximise this Man United game, where I think Chelsea will overrun Man United centrally. I think there'll be big mismatches against Casemiro, Mainu, and whoever plays in central defence. I think Chelsea will win this game. Palmer obviously on pens as well. We've seen against Wolves earlier in the year that you might even get 2 pens in the same game. And if you don't have him, that's obviously quite damaging. So he goes in. And then up front, Joel Pedro, Calvert-Lewin and Haaland, as I said. Main takeaways here, again, no Bournemouth defence, but I don't think they stand out enough. Defensively, there's a reputation for them that they get really good DEFCON. Lately, they've not been getting it any more than Van Hecker, Bijol and defenders like that. So maybe that's something that needs to be monitored. And with Bournemouth's XGC lately being quite bad, and the fact that they've got Newcastle away, do I expect a clean sheet there? No. Then they've got Leeds, where I've got Calvert-Lewin in my team. I'm happy to take on Bournemouth defence. Hill goes on the bench as my sort of 5th defender, but he's unlikely to be needed. Other subs, Okafor's gone in. He wasn't mentioned on any slides, but I only had 2 Leeds players, and I thought, what's the big upside fixture here outside of my 11? It's Leeds being at home to Wolves. Just scored 2 goals against Man United, so I wouldn't be completely against starting him, to be honest, for that reason. And then he's away to Bournemouth, who again have bad XGC. There's an arguable case here that he's a more valid punt than Cucurella. And I'd have to revisit that, obviously, before the deadline. What do I expect more? Okafor to score at home to Wolves or away to a Bournemouth defence with bad data? Or Cucurella playing Man United and Brighton? At the moment, I fancy Cucurella, but that could sway before the deadline. I'm not against that being my punt spot and having double Leeds attack, playing Wolves and Bournemouth rather than playing Cucurella. Diego Gomez takes the other bench spot up. It could have been Hinchelwood. It could have been Gross. Gross didn't rank it highly on any of the data. He's got secure minutes. Gomez, I say, getting DEFCON playing as part of the Brighton front three is significant. He started the last 6 games, so I think his minutes are good. But I don't think the upside is there in comparison to Tavernier or to Palmer or to Okafor, but happy to have him on the bench. So, yeah, that's the draft I've come up with. I'm sure this might cause some sort of controversy on social media because I say there's a few sort of interesting picks. No Semenyo, no Bournemouth defence being the main things. But I've tried to combine data with some eye tests there. 50-50 still for me on whether I captain Pedro or Haaland. I'm open-minded that Joel Pedro's probably is in better form than Erling Haaland, but will Haaland just run right against Burnley? Who knows? And then say Okafor versus Cucurella, I think, for my 11th spot. I think the rest of my team is fairly locked in, though, if I go through with this free hit plan. Still an option that I could wildcard this week and wildcard into something very similar to this team, to be honest, and then obviously make some transfers after I would free hit next week into Gameweek 35. Hope you found this video useful. If you have, please subscribe to my channel. Please like this video. Feel free to leave some comments below as well if you don't like any of my picks and let me know how silly I've been. Pick your own words carefully. Other than that, I'll see you all next time. Have some good luck on your free hit or whatever chip you're playing. And we'll say bye for now. See you later.